Hi, Carrie.
Hi, Leila.
Thank you for accepting this invitation to talk about your career path, which I'm sure will inspire a lot of people who are looking for their own path. So, to start this interview, can you tell us a bit where you were born and about your roots, your culture?
So I was actually born in the United States in the state of Florida to Haitian parents. Um, when I was a couple of months old, actually, my mom moved back to Haiti. So I had the opportunity to live in Haiti from pretty much birth until the age of 11 when I relocated to the United States.
Hmm.
Um, and then I started attending school in the United States from that point on.
Can you tell us a bit about your life during these 10 years in Haiti?
So I actually went to French all-girl Catholic school when I was in Haiti. So I had a pretty structured education. I got to live with my parents there, experience the culture, learn the language. It was a very unique experience to go back and forth because while we lived there, I would also come back and spend summers in the United States. So you get to kind of see the contrast of things like you spend a month here and then you go back to your life that's, as countries that are developing at different rate, that's completely different. So you get a balanced view of the world and get the knowledge that things can be different from a very, very early age.
Hmm. And how was your life when you finally moved to the US at 10, 11 years old?
So while I did spend the summers in the United States, I was never fully immersed culturally. I had to learn English. So I was a US born kid learning to speak English along with everyone else that had just came to the United States. So I was placed in English learning classes. To this day, I joke to people, and sometimes they believe me, sometimes they don't, that English is not my first language. English is my third language. I learned to speak Haitian Creole. I learned to speak French in school. And then I learned to speak English when I moved to the United States. So it was a very unique experience, but I was fortunate enough being that young, you learn quickly. I watched every cartoon I possibly could in English, every movie I could in English in order to expedite that because at home we continue to speak French and we continue to speak Creole. My parents and my grandparents were not avid English speakers. And so I learned to speak English and I learned to speak English in what a lot of people would say in a proper way because school was the place where I was speaking English and practicing English.
Hmm. Wow. And what kind of dreams or career aspirations did you have growing up in the United States?
Actually, I have to tell you, maybe it was all the back and forth travel. I used to want to be a flight attendant.
Oh, wow.
Well, that was very fleeting. And I think it was just if you recall what plane traveling used to look like. Um, I'll say a French phrase, les hôtesses de l'air. They used to look very elegant, dress well, the heels. And I think as a child, you see that and it's like mesmerizing that they're getting to pretty much travel the world and just well, now I know better that they don't just go wherever they want. But at the time, I believe they would just go wherever they want. But I don't think I wasn't a kid that grew up thinking, oh, I'm going to be a doctor or an engineer. I think my parents never really pushed, surprisingly for Caribbean parents, they never pushed a particular career. They just really pushed being educated. And so I think it was like, you're going to get an education, you're going to be educated. What that success was going to look like, they never clearly defined a career path for me. And so I think I just went out and kind of explored and figured it out without a specific thing that I was looking to do.
Hmm. So you had that dream, but what was your orientation? I mean, like in terms of career choices, what did you do as school choices? Uh,
So in high school,
mhm,
I had the opportunity to go to a technical school.
mhm.
And I got certified as a nursing assistant. I, for a minute, a brief minute, thought I wanted to go into healthcare. And the story goes, while we were on our rotation, I was in the hospital. We were assisting a patient in the hospital room. It was not the most pleasant of scenes. Um, I got really lightheaded, and I remember having to sit down and having my teacher come to me and say, "Are you okay?" It's like, "No, I don't feel good." And that's when I realized maybe the blood and all the health stuff wasn't going to be the thing for me. So while I appreciated that experience and got to experience that, I had the opportunity to do that in high school instead of going to college and then figuring out, oh, healthcare isn't for me. So that was like my high school experience was focused on the healthcare industry. I learned a lot. We had what they call on the job training at hospitals, at nursing homes, like to see what being in that career field was going to be like. And some people figured out this was going to be the thing for the rest of their lives. And some people like me realized this is not it and went in a different direction.
Okay. Wow, interesting. So what was the next step, the direction you took after this experience?
So this was high school.
Mhm.
After high school graduation, financially, college was looking difficult. We don't come from a lot of money, so paying for college would mean getting student loans, as many scholarships as I possibly could. And I, at the time, did not see a clear path forward where I wasn't going to be working, going to school, taking out student loans. My goal was to get an education
Mhm.
and how to find a way to make that happen. And when I was in high school, I took the entrance exam for the military. Now, mind you, I did this with no intentions of ever joining the military. I did this, and I joke about this, to get out of class at the time because I was a good kid and I needed a reason to get out of class. So I did it, took the test, didn't think anything of it. A couple of months after graduation, you get that phone call, you get that knock on the door. They're recruiting and they're asking, "Hey, like we saw that you took this exam. Are you interested in the military?" And I remember thinking, "Me, the military?" I reached out to one of my high school teachers and kind of talked to her, and she was on the verge of tears because I was a very shy kid. I was a very quiet kid, and I don't think anyone could have pictured a military career in my future just because of how introverted I was. And I still consider myself an introvert to this day, but so I spoke to her. She was really worried, really like, "Are you okay? Are you going to be okay going into this?" Um I made the decision to join the military. I spoke to the recruiter, went through the process, and he explained to me that one of the things that they were offering is the ability for me to get a college education, and it was going to be paid for. While I do understand a lot of people join the military out of a sense of being patriotic, for me, it started as something practical. It developed into being patriotic, and you learn all those things, and it comes for me, it came after the camaraderie and all those things like came. But the initial reason I made the decision is I needed an education, and they were willing to pay for it, and in exchange I was going to go, I was going to serve, and I was going to get the thing that I wanted in return.
Wow. And what was the process? You were talking about the process. What was in a concrete explanation, the process of entering in the military?
Oh, so um the recruiters go out, they talk to you, usually younger people. I don't know if they really, because around the time I went in, it was a bunch of recent grads from high school and kids that were still in high school on their last year. They talk to you, they kind of tell you what the process is. They give you, if you have to take your exam, entrance exam, you do that again. If I had to redo mine, because remember, I took my exam just to get out of class. I had no intentions of going, and they look at your score and they give you options as to what jobs are available. One of the things they ask you is, what are some of your interests? At the time, I started leaning towards, I knew healthcare wasn't it anymore. And I was looking at business, and I figured it was general enough that if I went into something like that. And so, what they offered when I told them I was interested in business and developing those skills was something along the lines of small business management and logistics. And so, while it was explained in a very glamorous way, the work itself turned out not to have been so glamorous, but you do have the opportunity to earn those skills. So, small business management, inventory, um, my very first duty station was on a ship. So, you do get to put those things into practice. Like, if I had to run a small business today, I have the skills to be able to do that. And I've had the opportunity to put them into practice because of the military.
Mm.
But yeah, and then moving forward, career wise, like they assign you from, you get in, you go to boot camp. I don't know if today's the day to explore all the boot camp stories. And, I had some tears my first day because never had anyone this close to my face yelling or any of that. Or it's all the things they do when you're in boot camp. Like, you learn to make your bed, you learn to exercise, you learn to eat a certain way. You're learning about regulations when it comes to the military, how to keep your uniform, how to properly fix your clothes in a drawer and line them up straight. So that piece wasn't the difficult part for me. I think for me was the yelling, right? Because once again, as a quiet kid, I just wasn't used to anyone like yelling and being in my space. So I think the biggest adjustment for me was that piece of it. But other than that, got through boot camp, went through training, and then I went out to my first duty station, which was out in the Pacific in a US territory called Guam. And I was stationed on a ship there.
What was the real like daily life on that ship?
Um, so daily was small business operations. The team I was with operated things, everything from the laundry on the ship to what we call the ship store. So just imagine a small store in a small city that carried all the things that they need to carry. Um, I'm about to date myself when I say this. The vending machines that were throughout, we handle things like the barber shop. So services for everyone on board, because ships operate like a small city. Because when you're in the middle of the ocean, it's you and you. Like, there's no one bringing services, there's no one coming to do these things. So the setup is that of a city, so you need all the things, all the essentials. So we handle all those things, maintain our inventory. So daily was about keeping all those things afloat, making sure everything was stocked in the store, making sure cash was collected when it was supposed to. These things are now cashless. This is why I say I'm dating myself from used to do these things. Now everyone just swipes a card, and there's no cash collection. Everything is a lot smoother and electronic. But it was that, in the opportunity to build some great friendships. I now have friends that I can say I've been friends with for the last 25 years. Um, and those friendships were built in those moments where we got to know each other. We were in the same spaces, experiencing the same things. that I know for a fact, like I can pick up the phone anytime and call any one of these friends, and I know they'll be there and they can do the same, and I will show up and I will be there for them. So that was the opportunity to learn a lot, grow, because at 18, what else are you going to do? And develop like some lifelong friendships.
Wow. Yeah, that lasts. Mhm. And after this experience on the ship, what was the next different? I mean, what were the next experiences that you had in the Navy?
When I left the ship, I had the opportunity to spend a year in Bahrain, which culturally that was very different. Um, just because of the environment, the structure, uh, it was just very, it was very different. I was used to I mean, even being in Guam, while there was a cultural component there that you get to experience the island, it was still one predominantly English speaking place with heavy American influence. So going to Bahrain, where it's a Muslim country with British influence, it was a little different. Great learning experience. This is where I had the opportunity, one, to learn about the culture, one, two, to learn about Islam, because I had the opportunity to go on tours of mosques, like understand what that was about. While I think multicultural exposure has, I was born in between two cultures anyway. So I think that exploration, and then following my time in Guam, having gone to different countries, being there, I was ready to learn. I was ready to learn in a way that was going to allow me to be respectful of the host country I was in. Um, because everybody does things differently, not necessarily right or wrong, just different.
Yes.
So I was definitely ready to learn. Um, had some great suits made while I was there, and just little things, great food, great people, very welcoming. So that was a really good experience. Career wise, I got to do more work in relations to logistics. So that was another side that I got to explore. Um, I also had the opportunity to continue my college education, to take more classes while I was there. Um, so it was really, really a good experience. When I left Bahrain, I had the opportunity to go to Hawaii, which is part of the United States, but it feels like a completely different world. I do realize how fortunate that I was that I got to go from Guam to a place like Bahrain to a place like Hawaii. And I finished out my military career in Hawaii working at a confinement facility, um, where I had the opportunity to do everything from corrections, which is essentially a jail, to counseling work and to some HR work. That was my introduction into what HR work was going to be like. But it was, and I also got to go to the beach almost every weekend because
Every
it was
day.
available and it was there. So it was definitely, while we worked hard Monday through Friday, on the weekend, it was great opportunities for barbecue, time with friends, hanging out at the beach, and developing even more military related friendships that I still hold dear today.
Wow. And is there any experience that you had in the Navy that has been very impactful and that you still like remember today?
There's quite a few. Like, I think, I don't know if it's a single one. I think it's been a collection of experiences that built on each other. Um, I think most of all, like learning to appreciate cultures, right? Because every place you go is different, whether you're there for a day because you pulled in a port, you got to run out and just see and grab some food, or you're going to be there for 6 months. Like I had an opportunity to spend in Japan. Like you learn, and it's a collection of experiences. And I think when you look back, it's not one single impactful thing, but everything that built on each other.
Mm, okay. And if I ask you about like the values or the mindsets that still guide you today from this experience, what would you say?
Navy core values are honor, courage, and commitment.
Mm,
And I do believe I still, especially in HR, get to continue to live those core values. So when you show up in an honorable way. You show up in a way that's going to be fair to people. You're going to do the right thing. And you have to show up courageous, because doing the right thing is not always the easy thing. Telling people they're wrong is not always the easy thing. Pointing out the things that are wrong is not always the easy things.
mm,
Telling people they have to do better is not always the easy thing. So I think that that component of courage that they help you develop remains with me to this day. And being committed, because after you showed up in honor, you were courageous enough to say it, then you have to stay committed to see it through, because you can do all those things and then get up and walk away. So you have to have the commitment to see it through to the end. And I see that as I'm thinking about it, it shows up in my work every day now.
mm. Wow. And one last question about this period of your life. What was it like being a woman in the military, especially in an international or operational context?
So I think as a woman, you develop ways to manage things that are very different. Um, how you show up
Mm-hmm.
is not necessarily how your counterparts show up. Um, I'll give you an example. Being in Bahrain, as a woman working in a place like Bahrain, and I've used this example often, while just the year prior, I was able to walk up to any of my male counterparts. The only thing they paid attention to was the rank on my collar, right? Like where I fell in the rank structure. I never felt that being a woman gave me a disadvantage in those situations. But when I got to Bahrain, we had third country nationals. We had people that had not had a woman telling them what to do, just by the structure of the culture.
Mm,
And so I had to navigate that in ways by telling my teammates to go tell someone to go do something that I could have very well told them myself. And being able to adjust to that and say to myself, I'm in another space. This is the culture here.
mm,
How do I get the work done and be respectful of where they are, and also maintain some respect for myself and understand. But at the end of the day, I think being a woman in the military is about learning to navigate each situation and the very real um scenarios that you're going to face, that it's okay if you don't handle things exactly the same way, because culturally, wherever you are, based on the culture you happen to be in, they're going to see things differently. I think when I'm in settings in the United States, there was more equality.
mm,
When I went to settings outside the US, in some cases, it was a little different and you just had to adjust.
mhm,
Um, the military's focus is mainly on the mission. And so, because that's the focus, I don't think gender posed, at least not in my case, gender didn't pose any challenges in me doing my daily work.
mm.
Um, Whether other people held other opinions and they felt very differently about it, it's very possible.
Mhm.
But I don't think I allow that to impact the things that I had to do and the way I navigated getting it done.
Okay, nice. And when did you start thinking about leaving the military? What triggered that decision?
Went in knowing I was going to leave. If we go back a little bit, the reason I went in was in search of being able to achieve a level of education. So I think from day one, it sounds crazy. While I was fully committed to the military, from day one, I started preparing my exit. Um, which over time, from the time I took my very first college class while I was on the ship to the time I took my very last college class, about 2 months before I was out of the military, that was always the exit strategy. Now I get it; it's a very long exit strategy to be spread out over 9.5 years because that's how long my service was. But I had an exit strategy. Um, I knew I wanted a family.
Mm.
I knew the challenges of having a family and being on active duty military. Um, and then this is where gender plays a part because as a woman, I would be carrying a child and I would be asked to go back out after a certain amount of time and I would have to leave my kid. Now, it is extremely admirable because there are a lot of women that still have their families that still are on active duty military. Their spouses are on active duty military as well. We have it, and it comes with some challenges. It does. I just personally did not see that as the choice that I wanted to make. And so I prepared to exit in a way that would allow me to transition and be able to have that when I was ready for it.
So, how did you prepare, and what was the next step for you when you were thinking about the exit strategy?
So preparation for me was ensuring that I was debt free. So making sure I had a vehicle that was paid off, attending every class, even if I was attending one class a semester when the opportunity came. While I was in Bahrain, I finished out my associate's degree because there's not a lot happening in Bahrain when you're there other than work. And so I went to school as much as I possibly could and finished out my associate's degree there. As soon as I arrived in Hawaii, I inquired as to what the educational landscape looked like because a lot of the times military bases will offer classes as well. And so I figured out where you could take classes, and it meant me leaving work at 5 and being in class at 5:30 or 5:45 whenever classes started, and being in class till 9 p.m. and then waking up the next morning for my military duties and being ready at 5:30. It meant staying up till midnight to make sure my assignments were done and turned in on time. It meant sometimes not being at the beach on Saturday morning, but Saturday afternoon. So going through and making sure I was going to classes, taking every opportunity where the military would compensate for you to get education and take classes. I did find time to build in some fun and some community projects in that time, but I was really focused on ensuring that I finished out my education because what was shared with me is a lot of my military friends would leave the military. Now, while they had a great amount of experience, the civilian world didn't necessarily see it as that. And so I wanted to ensure that I was marketable when I exited because I already had the experience. I had the leadership, I had those things developed. But unfortunately, I would like to say sometimes that's not recognizable unless you can say, I have a bachelor's degree or I have a master's degree. And so with that knowledge, I was like, okay, there's no way I'm exiting with all this experience And I'm constantly going to have to explain my experience to people. And that may not be where they are. They may have a job posting that says bachelor's degree required. While I may have everything it takes to do that job, I will not meet their requirement.
Mm.
And so my goal was to exit in a way, prepare so that when I got to the other side, not only did I have all this experience, I also have an education that matched and could have any opportunities that I needed to have.
Mm. And did you know at that time which positions or which field you wanted to work in?
So at that point, I had decided on HR. So my bachelor's is in human resource development, and I was able to complete that degree before I exited the military. And then shortly after, right after I exited the military, I enrolled into a master's program and I was able to complete my master's in human resource management.
Hmm. And why HR? Since you worked in logistics and different fields, why did you choose HR?
I think HR, I saw flexibility. I saw the opportunity to work with people, continued learning, and the opportunity to go into any industry. And I've had that opportunity to go into various industries. So you get to experience something different while continuing to do the thing that you're an expert in. And it's just about, so whether that's in logistics, where I get to apply HR and understand the business needs in logistics, and I get to apply that, or going into government and I get to apply the same foundational knowledge in HR, but I have to learn the industry that I'm serving every time I go to a different industry, right? But I get to carry the core of HR with me. So it gives me the opportunity to do something different,
Hmm.
but also continue to carry on a career path that's consistent.
Hmm. And how was the first your first steps, let's say, in the industry, in the civilian life? How was the transition?
So for me, I found the transition to have been fairly smooth because I went from the military into grad school. I was fortunate to be in a really good program. Shout out to Hawaii Pacific University in Hawaii. I was in a great program that gave us skills that I could speak to. Completed my certification right after graduation, which was another addition to being more marketable. Um, when I left Hawaii, I moved to the state of Washington because my spouse is still and was still in the military at the time. I moved to the state of Washington, had a transitional period because of family obligations, and then I started looking for work. I ended up working for a management company in conjunction with Department of Labor. That opportunity came because I was out in the community. I started to participate in HR, what they call SHRM membership, which is a HR organization that professionals get together. They have these events. Found out that there was an opening. I applied for it, was fortunate enough to have gotten hired. So once I was ready to work, now I have to say, I did put several applications out. It wasn't the first application and I got a job. I was applying to different jobs. I went out, interviewed, but this was the one that spoke to me the most. Um, that company worked with youth transitioning themselves, finishing high school, getting trades and things like that. So it was a great opportunity to work in a service-like environment that was giving back to the community I was in as well.
Wow. And what were the different industries then that you worked in?
So I went from working in the military to that management company. And then I then went on to work in aerospace manufacturing for a couple of years. When I left, moved to another state. I had the opportunity to work for the Department of the Navy again. So I went back and got to be in that environment, but this time as a civilian. So I worked with them for a couple of years and I relocated again. That's the life of a military spouse. I relocated again. And I now have the opportunity to work in education and have been doing so for the last 3.5, almost 4 years.
And what do you enjoy the most about working in HR?
Just the ability to just like you see a problem and sometimes people think people in HR are negative, but I think it's the ability to see a problem in front of you,
Mm-hmm.
solve it, and not just solve it for today, but projecting all the possibilities, right? Like, so if a company is growing, I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to hire just for today. I want to hire for today, and I want to hire with the ability to scale as they grow. I don't want to set up a pay structure that's good enough for the, let's say you're starting with a small company of 10. You don't want to set up a pay structure that's good enough for 10 people. You want to set one that's going to be good for 100 or 2 or 3. So just that challenge of constantly everything you do is not just right now. Like you're the mark you leave, like if you do the things right, when you leave, your work continues on.
Mm-hmm.
Like you no longer have to be in the room for
Mm-hmm.
your impact to continue. So I think the impact is probably my favorite thing. Um, I love to say leave it better than I found it. And so any improvement, anything you set up that you know there's room for someone else to come in and improve it, your work continues, your impact continues if you started out right.
Mm. Wow.
That's my favorite.
So that's nice, interesting. Yeah, it's very nice how you how you explain it and how you put it. It's very yeah, I would say inspirational. And so you've managed large teams and complex operations in HR. How would you describe your leadership style?
So for me, leadership is always a collaboration. Um, as a leader, you establish the idea, you present the overall goal, what the objective is. However, I never believe I'm the smartest person in the room. And so if I am in a room full of people, I want the opportunity to just harvest all the ideas in that room. And I do believe whatever the outcome is, it's going to be better if everyone has an input, simply because everyone has a different perspective.
Mm.
Someone will see a solution that I never would have thought of. They would have different experiences that maybe something that I'm thinking is a great idea, they've already experienced and know will not work, right? And they have the data as to why it would not work or why we need to adjust it in our situation. So I, as a leader, like to give the opportunity to my team members to bring forth their ideas. Let's work on it together. Let's figure it out together. If growth is what they want to give them the opportunity to execute things in their way and bring it back. While I do understand as a leader, sometimes you just have to make a final decision on something. You may not be able to share with your team why you're doing the thing that you're doing in that moment. Um, Open communication is how I solve that problem. Hey
Mm.
team, look, there's some things we're gonna have to do. Now is not the time where I can go into details about it, but we're doing it because we have an objective, we're moving towards it. And I find that gets you a lot of buy-in with people,
Mm.
even when you can't give them that information. If you tell them, I can't give you the information, this is the direction we're going in. So I think that's what I've adopted as I've been a leader over the last year, which is just being authentically me and telling them the truth and then moving from there.
Wow. And what have been some of the biggest challenges you've had to face in HR, especially, whether cultural, legal, or strategic?
Um, ooh, people is the biggest problem in HR. Just so I think the biggest challenge is the reason I say people is just when you think you've resolved an issue, you solved the problem, you created a solution, you get a human being unpredictable comes into the situation, and then you have to readjust. And I think just that continuous, it's a good thing and a bad thing. Like you're like, just fix this. And then the next challenge comes. Like while that can be exhilarating at times, sometimes it's a little frustrating, like because you're thinking to yourself, did I not just solve this problem? But there's a new human that's been introduced and they're creating a different challenge. Um, Strategically, I think depending on where you work, because I have worked for organizations that had the funding and they could spend it, and organizations that had to be more fiscally conservative in how they manage. Um, Finances sometimes is the challenge, right? Because in HR, you want to compensate people for their values, but sometimes there's limitations as to what you can compensate. We all have a budget. We all have, if you're, even when you're in a for-profit organization, you may have stakeholders that you have to ensure are getting, their return on their investments. When you're in a nonprofit organization, you get a smaller budget that you have to manage. So I think that's the financial challenge that I've seen. Other than that, I think those are the two. The people and the finance are usually what is difficult to navigate and continue to ensure functions cohesively.
Wow, that's interesting. Thank you for sharing it. And so, a question regarding again your path now. What would you say to someone currently in the military who's thinking of making a major career change? Yeah, what would you say to this person?
I would say be ready. Sometimes you forget, you learn a lot in the military, and it just comes with expectations, right? You learn all these skills, you're expected to execute at a very high level. But when you exit, you don't, because you've been doing this high level execution every single day, you don't necessarily think of that as a skill. What I learned is all those skills are transferable. So I would say sit down, write out all the skills you've learned. There's skill builders out there. There's website that will tell you what your job in the military translate to in the civilian world. Take the time, do the research, figure out what those skills are. Because I think a lot of the times in transition, military members don't realize how valuable they are when it comes to the market. Because when you transition, you're bringing in experiences and skills that can, and leadership that can only be earned in a setting like the military. So I think the biggest advice I would give them is figure out your personal value. And when you transition, be ready to speak to that value. That's another thing. Coming from the military, you come from a team mindset. So you say we a lot, right? And so going from a team mindset to being able to say good things about yourself and present yourself in that way, sometimes it's a challenge because you want to say we did well, and so in that transition, and now you don't have to be selfish, and it doesn't have to be I continuously, but in that moment of assessment, you need to be able to say, I accomplished, those are my skills, this is what I've learned, this is what I can do for another company when I transition. So just knowing yourself and figuring out where you can fit in moving forward.
Okay. And what would you tell the market, the civilian world working word about people coming from the military. Let's say HR who are recruiting people from the military, how to assess their skills, how to assess the profile as they don't have the experience, as they don't know this context.
Say that I did have the opportunity to have some of those conversations after my transition being in HR. Because I would be in a room and I would hear something like military personnel are rigid. Military personnel are not rigid. Military personnel know what it's like to have a plan, right? They know how to design a plan, have a plan, and execute a plan, right? And also, they know how to pivot. They know how to be in a situation that doesn't go according to plan. And so I think for a while, the perception of military personnel being rigid was out there. I think that has changed somewhat over the year. Like they're not flexible. While people appreciate things like saying military people will show up on time, but they're structured, they're rigid. I don't think that's always true. Now, you have individuals like the rest of the world. I tell people all the time, the military population was taken from the greater population. So you're going to have diversity in that, right? Like you're going to have people that are rigid and don't want to change, and you're going to have people that are a lot more flexible. But that's no different than your overall workforce, right? You have people with different needs, different ways of approaching things. So to them, I would say, give them the same opportunity. Understand that at the end of the day, you will have a resource and a set of skills that were developed in a way that cannot be developed anywhere else. So use that as a resource, tap into that, allow them to make the connections to your organization, allow them to bring some of that structure, some of that ability to pivot, some of that ability to lead into your organization so you can benefit from that, because you're not going to find that exact replica in anyone else, because it's such a unique situation for those people and the way they developed and the way they grew in the military that doesn't exist anywhere else. So give them an opportunity, and sometimes that may mean giving them an opportunity without a college degree, because they have developed that experience, because they have those skills. They have the ability to learn, which I believe is a large part of why a lot of organizations want to see a college degree, is they want to know you have the ability to learn. Well, they've proven their ability to learn because they left the life, went into a completely different one, learned lots of skills, grew, and now they find themselves in this place. So they have historically proven that. They just don't necessarily have a degree that says they were able to do so under the guise of HR or biology or sociology, but they have valuable life transferable skills.
Wow. And finally, if you could go back in time and talk to your 18-year-old self, what would you say to her?
You're going to be okay. Well, I would tell my 18-year-old self, you're going to be okay. Because I think there was a lot of anxiety, a lot of uncertainty going into being an adult. I would tell her she's gonna be okay, and that she's gonna do great things, and things that at the time that were not fathomable. There was no way of seeing that career path. There was no way of seeing the skills that were learned. There was no way of seeing the possibilities to the fullest. And in that moment, like being scared and not knowing which way life was going to go, simply that it's going to be okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Carrie, for sharing your path. Thank you for sharing your a period of your life which was very interesting and inspiring. And one last question, what can I wish you for the next few years regarding your career, your life, everything?
Can you wish me? I think success, peace, and retirement.
Okay, then I
I
wish you
I,
success.
I, I truly hope to be an early retiree and have the option to continue some of the travels that I had the opportunity to do in the military, see some places that I hadn't had a chance to see while I was in the military, France being one of them.
Yes.
So maybe you can wish me a visit to France.
Yeah, I wish you to visit to come. You're more than welcome, you and your family. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Layla.